Good afternoon, YouTube. It is just afternoon. Actually, it's almost 1. So I stopped just a little bit outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, at this service rest area. It's on I-44, just right at about exit 289 for Benita, Oklahoma. It's a pretty cool little rest area. They have a gas station for both lanes of traffic, and they have a sky bridge that connects both lanes. And I've driven under it a whole bunch, and I decided to go in and check it out today because I have a short run. I'm running from Tulsa, Oklahoma to Oak Grove, Missouri. I have about 225 miles to go. I'm going to stay at a truck stop there in Oak Grove that I frequent quite a bit for my fuel when I'm passing through, and make this delivery first thing in the morning. Today's load is a bunch of steel utility poles, and they are pretty big. Got about 30,000 pounds of them. Highly recommend stopping in at this little rest area if you're ever on the I-44. It's also called the Will Rogers Turnpike. If you're going into the Tulsa area. If you need to stop for a refreshment or a quick dinner or something, they do have a McDonald's and a Subway, and they also have the normal gas station goodies and refreshments that you can get. They also have a little gift shop, and me being me, I decided to visit the gift shop and buy my kids a couple of t-shirts. Like I said, it's a pretty cute little rest area, and it's got that sky bridge that goes over the interstate that you can walk on, and it's pretty neat. I don't know if you've ever been in anything like that, but they are pretty neat, and I do see them from time to time across the country, and I have stopped at others. So anyway, today I'm hauling like I said, I'm hauling a bunch of steel utility poles from a galvanizing plant in just outside of Tulsa. It's actually called Claremore, Oklahoma. Basically, this plant brings in these steel utility poles, and they coat them with galvanizing, and or they galvanize them, and then I deliver them to utility companies and job sites. I actually deliver a lot of poles. Every once in a while I'll haul one pole, which is a great big pole, and every once in a while I'll haul a bunch of small poles. There was one day I hauled one utility pole. It was a painted utility pole, and it was kind of a high dollar utility pole, but I hauled one from, let's see here, where was I? I was in Texas, and I want to say I was in not Austin. But in any case, I was about the middle of Texas, and I honestly forget. I think it was Houston. Houston was where I was at. I was in Houston, Texas, and I delivered one very small utility pole. It weighed about 2,000 pounds and had 2 sections. But it was one of those high dollar poles that cost, that cities probably pay a lot of money for. To go in their little ritzy areas, and I hauled it all the way from Houston to Denver. Okay, that was one pole. That could have been hauled by a small pickup truck with a trailer, and because it wasn't very long either. And I delivered it down there or up to Denver and dropped it off. But anyway, these poles I have now, they are 53 feet long, and they are galvanized, and I'm hauling 9 of them. I have what's called 3 layers They put them all on at once, but basically they are 3 layers, and they have to be strapped by using our nylon straps because they cannot have any metal touching them, or at least certain kinds of metal, because you can chip off the galvanizing and will make them pretty much worthless. I've heard of places turning the load down because they weren't galvanized enough. And for strapping, I mean, so it really kind of amazes me just what we use to secure our loads. So I have this 30,000 pounds of pole, and I have it secured by about, let's see, what do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. I think I have 7 straps. I think I threw an extra one on just because. It's better to be safe than sorry, and I am not afraid to do a little bit of extra work just to keep everybody else safe and to make sure that I'm not going to make any mistakes. And also, if one of my straps were to break, then at least I will have the extra one. So basically the rules for strapping is you have to have, but anyway, so it kind of amazes me that 30,000 pounds is held on by 7 straps, and realistically I could probably do the whole load with 5 straps. The rules are I have to have 2 straps within the first 10 feet, and then 1 strap every 10 feet after that. But like I said, I will always put more on because it's better to be safe than sorry, and it's only going to take me an extra 5 or 10 minutes to strap, and maybe an extra 5 or 10 minutes to unstrap and roll up. So an extra 15 minutes worth of work is nothing to make sure that I don't lose my load onto somebody's car. It just gives me a little bit more peace of mind. So anyway, so that's my little tidbit of trucking. Let's talk about the time that I started an investigation that closed down a jewelry shop. Okay? We had a local jewelry shop in town that was very popular. It was a locally owned jewelry shop. And this shop was actually very popular with cops and firefighters and ambulance. The owner was a pretty big supporter, from what I gather, of first responders and just any and big companies that were in the town where I'm from. He was also, a big supporter of them. So not only first responders such as cops, firefighters, EMTs, dispatchers. He was a supporter of emergency room staff, and he had lots of local people that would go to him for their jewelry purchases. And like I said, he was just very popular, and he was a very charismatic guy. I actually met him in person once. I've never bought anything from him. I've never really been a big jewelry person. And but I've never bought anything from him. But I did go in a store one time with a friend who was buying something, and the owner was there, and he was a very charismatic person, and will talk to you, and actually knew my buddy just from past business. They didn't know each other on a personal level. It was strictly professional. But this guy had friends that were cops also. Like, he actually had like personal friends that were actually cops. So anyway, I get a call one day to assist patrol with a burglary suspect that they had arrested. I want to say they basically caught this guy red-handed with items that he took from a burglary. And they brought him to the police station to be interviewed. One of those cases that I would probably grumble about, because it's a burglary that can and should be handled by the officers. I mean, they caught him red-handed with this stuff. If that's the only case, then really there's nothing to talk to him about. I mean, if he wants to talk, great. You get his story about that burglary and move on. You know, and if he doesn't want to talk, great. You caught him red-handed with the belongings that was reported stolen, and you book him in the jail. I mean, that's just basically it. There's not many moving parts. But I got called in anyway, and I quickly found out, and this was not known until, like, I'm basically the person that figured this out, that this guy was actually a part of a pretty big burglary ring. And I could just sense that there was, like, more to what was going on. Just having minimal contact with this guy, I could just sense that, you know, I believe he was part of a pretty sizable burglary ring, and that there's just a lot more to this. So I'm talking to him and interviewing him, and of course he has no problem talking to me, and he's one of these people that, you know, basically he's in trouble and he wants to give information and try and get out of trouble. And I always would tell people, I don't make deals, I cannot make deals. If you tell me something that can be useful in a different investigation, or you have a bigger fish to fry than what you are, I will take that information and I will lobby on your behalf for whatever it is that you are wanting. You know, of course, we just can't, the DA's office just can't make a deal with somebody without knowing what they have to give. Basically, there has to be some sort of trust from the suspect that that I will follow through with contacting the DA's office and say, hey, he gave lots of information on this case, or lots of information on these other people. It's very credible. It opened up this investigation, and I think we can go this route. And then they may let the guy plead to some lower level crime or even a misdemeanor, which would get him probation, or maybe even dismiss the charges altogether. It just kind of depends. So anyway, so I'm sensing that this guy's got all this information and that he wants to talk, and he basically has let me know. I mean, he was kind of teasing me with it. Had the carrot on a stick thing, because he knew. I mean, he wasn't a stranger to you know, this whole scenario at all. You know, he knew what my capabilities were. He knew what I could do for him. Okay, and he would dangle that carrot out there on that stick, you know, just right off my nose, letting me know that he's got all this other information. So I talked to this guy for a very long time. In fact, the detective who was helping me basically got tired of me talking and was like, hey, you got enough information? Eventually, the detective told me that I had enough information and that we needed to leave because we had some very serious storms rolling through. And we needed to leave before that. I didn't really agree with that because, well, I have a job to do. Sorry, but it is what it is. So anyway, so I start talking to this guy, and I get enough information, and I want to say I went ahead and booked him into jail, because that's something that, you know, I have some control over, whether or not I book somebody into jail. And basically I worked it out to where he was going to give me a lot more information. And before, so that night, I think that night is when he actually told me about the jewelry store part. He let me know that this burglary ring that he belongs to would take the jewelry that they stole to this jewelry store, and this jewelry store was knowingly buying stolen jewelry from them. But not only that, this jewelry store was also supposedly financing their burglaries. Supposedly, this jewelry store owner was renting them cars and just basically just helping them out so that they could go commit their burglaries. And in turn, they would bring items back to the jewelry store. In fact, the burglary suspect, told me about a diamond ring that he had sold to this jewelry store. And he told me the amount that he got for it. I want to say he got paid like $5,000, or I'm sorry, $500. But it was it was a pretty expensive ring. It was like a $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 ring from what I remember. And I looked at the guy and I told him flat out, I was like, you got robbed. If he only paid you $500 for that ring, he took advantage of you. And the guy just kind of chuckled about it. And it was my way of kind of lightening the mood and just kind of, just doing a little bit of rapport building and making sure that what rapport I've built is being maintained. And he basically told me, what am I supposed to do? It's stolen. I take what he gives me. So, we kind of had a little laugh about that and went on to conducting our business. Well, as part of this investigation, another detective helped me out who actually investigated burglaries. At the time, I was actually investigating homicides. I just happened to be working. It was my turn to work the weekend, or I got called in. I might have been, yes, I was the callback detective that week. That's what it was, and I got called into work. So if I get called in to work a burglary, I work a burglary. It doesn't matter if I'm in a homicide or not. So anyway, I had got called in, and a detective that works burglaries some days later got pulled into this investigation. And he made a book for me, a notebook of burglary reports that included pictures of the houses that were burglarized, that were burgled. I'm sorry, I like to use the term burgle and burgled. It actually drives some people nuts, but burgle is actually a word, and it is actually the proper word for when somebody commits a burglary. But anyway, he made this notebook for me of these houses that had been burgled, and they had included pictures of the houses. And I had sat down with this guy at one point, with the suspect, and was going through the burglary book. We called it the burglary book. And we were going through it, and he would tell me, yeah, I remember that case. We stole, I was with so-and-so and so-and-so, and we stole a 32-inch TV, a PlayStation, and some jewelry. I go to the items reported stolen page, and what he told me was exactly what was listed as the items that had been stolen. We did this with numerous burglaries. I would show him a picture of the house, maybe give him the address as well, and he could recite. Even if he wasn't one of the people involved, he would tell me that, the names of 3 people that did commit that burglary, and this is what they got. I mean, the guy's memory was just amazing. Probably one of these people that could do just about anything he wanted in life, if he wanted to, So we just kept going through this book, and at one point, I kid you not, we got to one page. He looked at the house and he says, "Yep, we got. I did this burglary with so and so and so and so, and this is what we got." And then we hit the house right next door as well and got this, this, and this, and this. I kid you not, I turned the page. The house he told me about was the house in the book, was the next page. He had no way of knowing. I didn't know that house was next. I had just been given this book. I didn't go through it. I just was given this book, said, here, go through this book with him and see if we can identify burglaries. He was able to identify so many burglaries off the cuff, just strictly from memory, that when we had the 2 or 3 that he couldn't identify, people were pretty relieved, because it was kind of one of those believe it or not situations where he's reciting all these cases from memory, and some of them he wasn't involved in. He just knew the people that were. And he also told me about another local business in the town where I'm from that would sell the electronics, basically. And he said you would walk in there and it looked like a Best Buy. He said they had TVs and game consoles and all kinds of other stuff. And also, the owner of this business would not take any TV smaller than a certain size. I forget what it was. I forget what that size was. But anything smaller, he didn't want it. There just wasn't a market for it. He wanted big TVs because there was a market for it. So this guy, the suspect in the whole case, he tells me that he gives me what they look for in a burglary. Like, they will take the rental car that the jewelry store owner would rent them, and they would drive neighborhoods and they would case these houses. They wouldn't just like pick a house and go hit it. They would get a few houses and do their homework on it and do some surveillance and see what the neighborhood is like. I mean, they were very smart about it. They said they like to hit during the springtime because a lot of people just left their windows unlocked, and they would enter a lot of the times through unlocked windows. And also, they like to hit houses that had kids' playground equipment on the outside, like in the yards, because they thought that those houses would have plenty of electronics. And so anyway, I kid you not, we probably had 30 or more burglaries in this book, and was able to identify at least all but maybe 3 to 5 of them where he just didn't know. Now, it could have been done by people in his crew and he just didn't know it, but that's it. I mean, he identified him. So we obviously get very interested in the jewelry store. The other business, it was pretty well known that it was actually a drug front, and so we just kind of left it alone because didn't want to step on anybody else's toes, because there is a lot that goes on that we will investigate, and you will never even know we were there. But anyway, so we knew the jewelry store wasn't under investigation, and we decided that we would investigate the jewelry store. This guy made a controlled phone call for us to the jewelry store at one point. We spoke with the owner and talked about bringing in some jewelry for him to buy. And we even had the FBI get involved in this. Like, they fronted us some jewelry. I mean, it was just a great big huge operation, and to be honest with you, it was a little bit bigger than what I really care for. But I had no control, unfortunately, of how big it got. Even though I was one of the lead detectives, once bosses get involved, they're going to do boss stuff and amplify things to the point that they shouldn't be. I myself, if I had it up to me, I would have kept my boss in the loop. My boss would have stayed out of it. His boss would have stayed out of it. His boss would have stayed out of it. And their boss would have stayed out of it. And I would have only worked a case with me and maybe 1 or 2 other detectives, and maybe and since the FBI was involved, maybe our FBI liaison officer. We have an officer from our police department that actually works with the FBI on cases. In fact, we have a couple of them. But typically, I like to try and run things a little bit more small scale, because it's less moving parts and less that can go wrong. And something huge went wrong. So everything was all good. This guy had already made the phone call, talked about he's going to bring in some jewelry for the owner to look at. Everything was all copacetic and everything was cool. The day we decided to do this undercover operation, our cooperating individual walks into the jewelry store with his quote-unquote stolen jewelry, and was immediately confronted by the owner and kicked out because he doesn't buy stolen jewelry. He made some comment to him of the sorts, "I don't buy stolen jewelry, you need to leave." And he left. So basically we suspect that one of his cop friends probably tipped him off somehow. This really pissed me off, and it pissed off my partner in the investigation as well, because we had put a lot of work into this at that point, and there's going to be a ton more work put into it from here, only to get basically ratted out by a fucking cop. Sorry for my language, but that's how I feel about it. You know, it pissed us off. I'd be willing to not let the jewelry store owner go to prison just so he'd give us the cops, so the cop could have been fired. But anyway, the jewelry store owner would never tell us who tipped him off, and would never even confirm that he got tipped off. He just basically kept that to himself. He was a good soldier, kept it to himself. So we end up arresting the jewelry store owner with everything that we had, and basically seized the entire store. We shut the store down, and I mean, it was just a big crazy mess. The store had basically, let's see here, he worked there, his wife worked there, and I think another friend worked there, and I think that was it. They just basically, him, his wife, and a third employee, maybe one other person. And I remember talking to the employee who was just flabbergasted that this stuff went on, even though this employee was kind of a manager. I mean, I think, in fact, I think she was the manager. Like, she was in charge of, I think, cutting all the checks or salaries and things like that. So I got to the part of, and actually I'm going to rewind a little bit. So the owner of this jewelry store had lived in a great big nice house, probably $500,000. And where I'm from, $500,000 gets you a big nice house, especially back then. This was in probably 2010, 2012, maybe. It might have, yeah, it was probably around 2012, 2013. But anyway, he also had 2 drag racing cars, because he was an amateur drag racer, like actual, like, Copa Camaros. If you don't know what they are, look them up. It's COPA Camaros. He had 2 of them, and they are extremely expensive. I think he had a big nice boat, a big nice camper, just all kinds of stuff. So I'm talking to the manager, and I get to the part of asking about income. And I ask her, I said, what kind of money does he make? I mean, how does he get paid? If the jewelry store has a good week, does he have a good week? If the jewelry store has a bad week, does he have a bad week? Or does he just have a salary? She says, oh, no, he has a salary. She told me what his salary was, and I about fell out of my chair, because I told her that I made that kind of money, and there's no way I could afford that kind of lifestyle. Oh, and one other thing that he did was he would take, it was him, his wife, his employee, and her husband all on a vacation every year that he paid for. But I about fell out of my chair, and I told her, I said, look, I can't afford that kind of a lifestyle, and I make that money. Heck, I was probably making more than that. And it was kind of funny, because I learned at the same time that the audience that was watching my interview, because we could live stream our interviews to a conference room, and it had all the bosses there. And I learned later that my big boss made the same comment about how the detective interviewing her makes that kind of money. And yeah, it was just one of those things. And I could kind of see the light bulb go off in her head, or go off above her head, I guess, when she realized that, well, maybe living this kind of lifestyle is hard for somebody that only makes about $80,000 a year. Because it was something around around that, around $85,000 a year was what he was making, and he lived in a $500,000 house, had 2 cars that valued at probably, my guess, totaled around $250,000. And drag racing hobby, yeah, that's not cheap. Okay, so he had to do that. So the rumor was, and this is strictly a rumor, I don't remember, well, I don't remember if it was able to be verified, but supposedly he would pop the gems out of the rings and would sell them on the open market. He wouldn't go through a store, he would just sell them to some of his drag racing buddies. And he would melt the gold down. And the other detective at that point kind of took everything over. I stepped out because this is going to be a very long and intense investigation. And I was a homicide detective, so they didn't want to tie up a homicide detective for several months. And this investigation ended up taking about 6 months. And it ended up being the detective that came in on it, that took it over, and a forensic accountant, I think, from the FBI, where they basically went over all the books and they got into the whole like gold melting business, which was just crazy. I mean, that stuff is just crazy, where basically you get a bunch of scrap gold together and you can either ship it or take it yourself to these businesses that will melt it down for you, take out all the impurities, and give you your basically a small gold bar for what you have. And there was just lots of that going on. Anyway, so at the conclusion of the investigation, the suspect in the case actually ended up doing, I think, 1 year and 1 day in the federal penitentiary. I think he got some kind of early release good time, but nonetheless, he ended up doing 1 year of prison time for this. And I want to say that it was offered to him, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I want to say that it was offered to him that if he gave up the cop who tipped him off, that he would receive no prison time. But like I said, he was a good soldier and did not give up the cop. And my partner in all this, the guy that took over the investigation, he has a theory on who the cop was. And he wasn't too shy about openly talking about who he believed it was as well. But like I said, that's the dangers of getting an operation, getting it so big that you're dealing with multiple mouths and multiple ears. And I mean, heck, realistically, I guess it could have been somebody going home and talking to their spouse about it, and their spouse called the employee, and the employee tipped off the owner. I mean, I guess it could be something of that nature as well. It could have been something totally unintentional by the cop, but clearly it's a cop somewhere messed up. And in that case, it was so huge it did get talked about. There were lots of people that knew that the investigation was going on, and if I had if I was, well, I explained to you what I thought about the oversizedness of it. If I was involved, if I was ultimately in charge of all that, I would not have had it so big. Not so big at all. I mean, it was just crazy big. Way too many people knew about it. Anyway, hey, if you like these videos, like hearing me blab and talk and tell you about some of the things I've done as an investigator, hit that like button and share my videos. And like I said, give me some comments, give me some constructive criticism, give me some pats on the back, whatever you want. I am open to anything. Until next time, you guys have a great day.